Hello, 다시 들려?
Hello, everyone.
아니, 정말 정말 잠디 다 네발레나 쇼바델레 테네 터치가 카시네 테네 페제 공모 닝고 인주레 공모델레 닝고델레 당 냠도데네 해피 크리스마스 다 뉴 이어 게네 가서 그래 다시 들려 망부 슈기스
So, to everyone here in the same type of time zone as Nepal, I'd like to wish a good evening, good morning, and some of you in other countries, for some of you it might be evening or it might be midday, so good morning, good day, good evening, and also Merry Christmas to everyone and many happy wishes for the new year.
아니 니바디 정말라 공다 주기스 데니 딩어 딘다직 비제 딘다니스 데니 만조 추티디 에 아주 중요 말에 가르르스나 나 도시 데버 중마송스 디 겐기 데니 최데 무티미 간소레 추티디 중마송 디 텔라니 공다 주기스 닝 타바
And secondly, I'd like to say sorry for having paused our Dharma teachings here for a few weeks now. The reason that we had to interrupt the teachings for a few weeks was because I was a little ill. So from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to present my apologies for that.
저 드링기 추리디드네 야세 무주 통매기 제베드네 야세 라레 소드마데레스.
And the topic of today's Dharma talk is Gyaltse Tokme's 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas.
Dini tadi Tugundu teni jida ngarazo lama ngarazo ta piji kimbo re teni kadi shesomba yenaya teni tomar de ngarazo kulong de kechimbo ji pesongwe labar de ngarazo da kepa chimbo yinzang teni de kulong de mesebe kechimbo ji insare They do kini kulong di ta chue nyendu re chue samdu re ni chue gomdu re kare nang bai na tini chi kulong di tomar kulong di pe gechon bai sare di ndu de ni kina ba soma la yang jang e chi chensu chi shugin is ni kulong ma ju bai na kulong chero is Teni chue de la teni kulong mandawa rimba namba sum zure teni ngema ishu bayin ta se digi chi kipo yongaya da nasa mayonga ki che doyang chue nyen sam gom chi gen yore nipa de teni se digi dunga digi ta jikba se gore dendele tan teni chi Mondo mele kovan tobe gi chido yan chue chingen chi gi yore nibat sumbade da yaksho de da kolong ge na ne kolong chok du gyurba de ni ji rang ji bu ma yin ba simje thamje ni korwa donga ji jamso dele thare gi de ni ji thare gi thapse gore thare gi de ni sem powa se gore de ji de ni semma kin tene semje thamje gi chidu chu nyingi samgi gomgi sam di ta kolong chodu gyurba ji insare dendeji chungna ani che kare jesona che di ji ga so gore Nubachimbo, Yana Chudi, Jumzena, Jumze Yahoji, Yungre, Tingidus, Ticolon de Chuna, Yahodo Samala, Ning Tabani, Goreandi, Taz is somebody digimare, Ning Tapani Gongores, Judis.
And so, as I always say, generally, whenever we receive teachings from a Lama or Kempo or anyone, setting one's motivation is extremely important. And especially for us belonging to the great vehicle, in the great vehicle, setting the right motivation is extremely important. Whether we are listening, contemplating, or meditating on the Dharma, it's extremely important to first set the right motivation. So now I'd like to remind you of this once again. If you haven't yet set the right motivation, please do so. And also, as I explained before, there are 3 types of motivation, 3 successive stages or levels of motivation. First, one can just listen to the Dharma or contemplate or meditate just in order to be sort of happy and healthy in this life. That's the first type of motivation. The second type of motivation is fearing the suffering and dangers of this life and the next, longing for liberation from suffering. That's the second type of motivation. But the best type of motivation is to not only listen to the Dharma or contemplate or meditate for oneself, but to actually do so for the benefit of all sentient beings, so that all beings may be liberated from suffering, so that we may have the means and the courage to liberate all beings from the ocean of suffering. And so with this type of motivation, thinking that we are listening, contemplating, or meditating on the Dharma for the benefit of all beings, that is the very best type of motivation. And so whatever Dharma practice, Dharma activity you engage in with this motivation, that it'll make it that much more powerful, or this is really the best reason one can have to engage with Dharma. I think so. Please set your motivation, and not just sort of, on the intellectual, mental level, but really from the bottom of your heart, set the right motivation.
어디다 아니 다 정말 당보 말아주 주도의 날에 되니 다 년도에 삼도에 공도에 디디 당보지 그런 다다 니바다 슝코랑 다다 야세 라울렌디 니 야세 라울렌디라 통마르게바 레기든 세지다 되니 바르디게바 슝기든 아니 타마르게바 주기든 세니 나라 레나마순스 두스 당보
So then whatever you are engaging in terms of Dharma activity, whether it's listening, contemplating, or meditating, please set the right motivation. And then as for our text, which we are looking at now, the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas, there are 3 parts to this: the virtue in the beginning, the virtue in the middle, and the virtue in the end.
에디나 당볼 가진 통마르게발리기 되는딜라드니 초버저바다 잠버 담자바니 두스 되니 가진 공도 되니 초버저바디 되니 숭차바레스 다나갑스 바와드니 잠버 담자베
So for the first virtue, the virtue in the beginning, there are two parts, the homage and the pledge to compose. And last time in the first session, we finished discussing the homage, and so now we've reached the pledge to compose. So the homage consisted in these first 4 lines. You see that all things are beyond coming and going, yet still you strive solely for the sake of living beings. To you, my precious Guru, inseparable from Lord Avalokita, I offer perpetual homage respectfully with body, speech, and mind. And so this we have already gone over.
Pende jungni zokpe sangye nam damche druble jungdi deyani de lalen she la ralete jasin namje lalen she bar ja se di dini tanda shologa shidi ne chamra damjawa tengi dos.
And so today we start then on the next verse of 4 lines. The perfect Buddhas, who are the source of all benefit and joy, come into being through accomplishing the sacred Dharma. And since this in turn depends on knowing how to practice, I shall now describe the practices of all the Buddha's heirs. So this now is the pledge to compose.
tenjo di tenji tsamgi yin di dan din nang shin ji tsamgi yin sen ni damja tsambar damja wa sa ji do ni de damja di ge chimbo yin bi gemzen la ni tsambar damja wa sa de sung yisare.
And so every treatise, whatever it is, always has this pledge to commit. So basically making a pledge to compose, making a commitment, a vow that the author makes a vow that he will compose this text, because commitments are so important. This is why these pledges to compose are made.
테니지 나추 대단되다 보지 두부이 심제 탐지기 체도 아니 지 코로와 동아 야솔에 달되더니 산지주 고방라 짤기이야 테니 덴조기 체도 나추 지기 세디 최지기 세바 짬지디기 요서 말에 테니 뭐 공마다 산지에 장주 선발에더니 디비신이 망보지다 제베 덴데 줍두레 심지 체도 지나야 네 가두이나 남자지 랭그리스 남자 텔레 남자 세야 된 거라서 등산세나 지금 프로미스 거래 양나 지금 커미트먼트 거래 근데 지 레나 되니 지 가서 거래 나절로 마당 심지 탐지 봐 마치에 되네 마임바 콘조기 체도 제 최지나야 최 부탁보지 용해 심지 탐지기 체도 지나야 심지 탐지기 체도 제와들라 야보지 용거였어요. 네 인도 남자 세디 개침보지 인사레스 갈침보레도스.
Generally, when we practice Dharma, it's not enough to just say, "Oh, I will practice Dharma. I'm going to practice in order to liberate all beings from the ocean of suffering and establish them on the level of Buddhahood. I will practice Dharma for that reason." It's not enough just to say that. Actually, when we look at the examples of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the past, they made a commitment, or we could say a promise, to practice the Dharma in this way. So it's important to actually make this type of pledge or commitment, because when one takes this type of pledge, then one won't just give up or change our minds so easily. So making a commitment in this way is a good way to ensure that one's Dharma practice for the benefit of all beings is genuine and authentic.
tenju khare ji tsamna dikap su deni tenju peja khare ji kenamba sina ya digi ula digi gondo deni kawa ina ji tsambar damjaba de yores karsana damja de gejumbu indu tenju tsamna ya tsame de simje thamji gi chedu chedube gi chedu tenju tsamba inza deni gondo khade na tsamba damjaba de yores.
So this is why whatever treatise you read, in general, you will always find at the beginning of the text this pledge to compose, where a commitment is made to compose this text in order for the benefit of all beings. So one would always find this type of pledge to compose at the beginning of the text.
Didi tsambar damjava se de kanti gechimbu yimedre tata de kurang la pejo kurang la pende juni zobu sanje nam se jidwa damche tuble juni de lale chila rale se rag lepe jasin nam lale shebar se de pende juni se de pende namba ni negab gi pemba ta tardo gi dewa di namba ni sungu res pende se.
So this is why pledge to compose is so important. Now, as for the contents of this pledge, it reads, the perfect Buddhas who are the source of all benefit and joy. So here, benefit refers to temporary benefit, and joy, or one could say happiness, refers to the ultimate happiness.
Pembas edi tata ngaranzo sanje gi mondo ngele gi di pemba di mashana di tata ngaranzo kapsu baba di manganchewa ji ngaranzo tenzangi midaji na chöchige manganchi 근데 ngele gi chidu chige yo mare ngone 좀 shena tengza manganchi gi pembe gi chidu chige res pembas na da chige ngaranzo korwale kyamgengi simjen이 되라 참자 semba kibu meba 아니 semba dewu meba shiwa meba peace meba teni kibu meba central mangbo tadida oje yongde yore ngaranzo tengsangi chiso nanglo mi mangchi wala di yore digi kanga yore digi dunga yore tadi semra yowa tela di semra meba chiye semba shiwa meba tela semba shiwa chiye semba kibu meba tela kibu suwe ki chedo teni chigi dewa chedo ngaranzo chue chigi yora ya tamboshana ta dil pemba se de tanda negab gi pemba de la shigi yores di ta yang di pemba to ma de sanje ge sung yores de chue de pemba gi chedo che na ta di chue le la shimba ji ta nyeg ma res shimba tap shimba ji ngaranzo rang ma res.
So benefit here doesn't refer so much to the realization of the Buddhas, but rather it refers to the reason most of us here are practicing the Dharma. Actually, we as sentient beings who are wandering in samsara often experience unhappiness, unease of mind, worry, general mental difficulties. Nowadays in our society, we see a lot of mental trouble, mental unhappiness. And so wanting to find calm when our minds are troubled, to find ease when our minds are uneasy, to find happiness when our minds are unhappy. Those are the reason most of us actually practice the Dharma nowadays. And the Dharma does have this type of benefit. It's not that the Buddha didn't teach the Dharma for these reasons as well. Actually, the Buddha Dharma is the very best method to achieve these goals.
Tene di pende se di ta pemba di dire dia pemba dia dubgona tene dambi chue dubala tene di pemba dia yongu yores Tini Deva said that Pemba said that Negab gi Pemba said that the said the Negab ji Penger Mado, Sechima re, Tini Sanji Koba, Tarbada Tamji be Koban, Tovella, Pingamare, Inaya, Negab ki, Jaji Jati Pengeres, that Sechima Deva di Mondo Nelegi, Tanji Pende said Deva said, Tini Deva di Karesana, Tini Mondo Nelig ni. Modo lada mi go banda ngele teni tharbada thamji jimbi go ba de ni ja teni dambi chue khorang le drubal le teni chungur de ma sung da phende jumni jogbe sanje thamje kya teni dambi chue khorang le dambi chue drubal le teni chungba res gyu khan le chungba res na ti dambi chue khorang le teni drubal le teni chungjo res negab ji phemba da thardo gi Tengondo Ngelegi Dewa. Deya teni jiki dambichwe drupal teni chungueres. Gyudi dambichwe drupal teni chungueres.
So this is the types of benefit that can be achieved based on practicing the Dharma. The Dharma does bring this type of benefit, but this type of benefit is only for this life. This is just temporary benefits in this very life. Aside from that, these types of benefits do not bring anything in the next life. They do not bring us to the level of liberation or omniscience. However, if one does practice the Dharma for the next life in order to reach the higher rebirth, or beyond that to reach the true good, which is the level of liberation and omniscience, then that is also achieved based on the Buddha Dharma. So whether one practices the Buddha Dharma in order to be reborn in the high states of the gods and humans in the next life, or in order to achieve the ultimate happiness, which is the state of liberation and omniscience. All the Buddhas, all the perfect Buddhas of the past have achieved this based on practicing the Dharma.
Then they love down the land. Nega Jipemba the third the Pende Jungni, Jungsato, the Deni Kani Yunguresana, and Job Sanje Nam the Chungueres, and then Job Sanje Nam the condition was a Dambichu Duba Latin Chungueres. And Job Sanje said that she young De Mao Tata Dusum Sanji Chikula Mako, Sanje Tongzani, Kalba Tongi, Sanje Tongzani, the Chamayang. Teni gyudi kare chungsa dambi chu drupa le teni chungures ta phemba dan dewa ki negab ji phemba dan thardu ki devi and chungsa gyudi teni jogba sanje res jogba sanje khase di jigden de la majum ba ina teni konam ki chu sungu mare chu masung ba ina ngarang jo ki negab da thardu ki dewa de ya teni ha khodu mara tele thoba samba gomba chi tu go mare ani dim je mato ba ina Then around the negative Pembaya Toku Mare, Tabdogi, Dini, Mondo Gelegi, Dewa Dea, Toku Mares. That they Tobe the Jumzen de Dini Sanje Jun de la Pena Tanda Nazo Rangjurma da Shenjunga Capsula, Dini Sanje Jun da De Chu Sum Seda, Sanje Jun da De Chu Sums, Sanje Naranzo. They come the Zamboling de la Ma Junre, Jun de Konabagi Chusung Re. Chusung Dani around the Chu de la Tene, the Nitosom Consum Cheni. They ran la Negab Jipemba Tardu Deva, Chungegi Guyang, the need Sanji Konaba Latini Chungures. Tendi Jun is over Sanji Namseda, Damche Juble, Chung di Dian, Sanji Damje, then Dambiche Juba Latini Chungura. All this sick need.
And the text says the perfect Buddhas, who are the source of all benefit and joy, come into being through accomplishing the sacred Dharma. So what is the source of this temporary benefit and this ultimate happiness? Well, temporary benefit and ultimate happiness all come from the Buddhas. the teachings of the Buddhas, who themselves, the source of all Buddhas is actually the Dharma. All Buddhas have reached awakening based on practicing the Dharma. All Buddhas of the past, present, and future, all the 1002 Buddhas of our fortunate eon, all of them without exception, have reached awakening based on their practice of the Dharma. So in that way, all of our benefit and happiness, as the text said, comes from the perfect Buddhas, and the perfect Buddhas themselves, they come from, their source is the Dharma. And however, it doesn't suffice for Buddhas to just appear in the world. In order for us to be able to achieve benefit and happiness, they also need to teach the Dharma, right? So it's not enough for Buddhas to appear and then not teach, because if the Buddhas do not teach, then we aren't able to know what the causes of benefit and happiness actually are. And without knowing what the causes of temporary benefit or ultimate happiness are, then we won't be able to achieve these. So in that way, the root cause of our own temporary benefit and ultimate happiness is, as it is said, for the Buddha to come, to remain in this world and to teach the Dharma, right? And so it's based on the Buddha's teaching of the Dharma once the Buddha has appeared in this world. Based on that we can then engage in listening, contemplating, and meditating on the Dharma. And based on that, we can reach temporary benefit and ultimate happiness. So this is the way in which perfect Buddhas are the source of our benefit and happiness, as well as the way in which the sacred Dharma is the source of all Buddhas, as these first two lines of the text say.
Didi dam chu double jum de anes di share da dambi chu druba de ni da dambi chu da si dam chu double jum de anes di laglen she la ragle be se de da dambi chu drup da ngarazo ma mi ma chu de dambi chu drup se de da nyame che drugi drup ta chi mi ma chu ngarazo drup drugi da ji khaze ji drup she ma she ji ha ma gona ji drup drugi res ji gom jab she chu nyen she tene ji sambaya ji tene ji la gom nga da tene ji tene ngarazo ma chu ba ji ge res da drupa ji bu ji ge ma re da de ge lagle ya bo ji she gorsta da lagle ya bo ji ma she na tene ngone ji khaso gore dambi chu yang da ba ji drup tup ge ma re yang da ba ji drup tup je bala tene lagle ji ya bo she gorsta lagle zna ta ngone ngora ngara zo lagle tar tang de ba khane ji lagle tar go de lagle de wal she do de lagle she la lagle pe se de dambi chu gang de la sanje dambi chu drupa le chungu yor da dambi chu drupa ji gur dige ma de lagle de ya bo she gores lagle ya bo she de na tene ngara zo chu yang da ba ji drup tup ge res.
But then the next line says, and this in turn depends on knowing how to practice. So really, actually, when we talk about accomplishing the Dharma, that's all very well. Most of us, we do practice the Dharma in some way or form. However, we do so perhaps knowing or not really knowing the actual methods for practicing. So most of us do meditate, contemplate, visualize the deity, recite mantra, and so on. But it's not enough just to do this. One also needs to know how to do it. One needs to know the method. One needs to know how to actually practice, or the Dharma we are engaging in won't be the authentic, genuine Dharma. So for this, we need to know the method for practicing. So it's not just that perfect Buddhas appeared based on practicing the Dharma, but actually based on practicing it correctly, knowing how to practice it correctly.
Lale Yaboji, Kazi Lale Yaboji, Mashena, Tini, Tambichu, Tsushindu Druptuma, Tsushindu Senati, Tambichunga, Givi Shinye, the Sanje, the Chanju Simba, Tini, Maranzo, Goma, Nyamlin Chigingi, Gijin, Goma Changma, Gihonaba, Tsushindu, the Lalen Kareji Chedu, the Ribajer, de Tsushindu, Kazi Majiba ina. 수신도 룩 가세 마토바 있나 되니 나라서 담비추 약보지 차게 말했더니 노도 그랬어. 가르스나 최 lok바 도와다 최래 지네 최라때 최라 때네더니 지 나라서 내송로마 도야다오다. 아니 지최 신도 마시는 최지 라른 내송도 저기 유지세. 근데 그저 하시나 송샤바 나신 되니 라래 약보지 지당 마시나 되니 최고양 아라도 람 노르발라 드에게 년가 용그레스
Because if one doesn't know how to practice correctly, if one doesn't know the correct methods of practice, then one won't be able to practice the genuine Dharma, the authentic Dharma. And so all of the teachers of the past, the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, the great beings who came before, all of them knew how to practice correctly in order for their Dharma to be genuine. Because if one doesn't know the correct methods for practice, then one's Dharma will not really be genuine. It won't be the right type of Dharma, and there's a big danger that we might practice mistakenly. And as it is said, practicing the Dharma in a way that doesn't accord with the Dharma is a cause for being reborn in the lower realms. So practicing the Dharma in a way that is actually not the right dharmic way is said to be, the texts say that this is actually a cause for rebirth in the lower realms. So if one doesn't know how to practice correctly, there's actually a great danger that one might take a mistaken path.
데 김젠델라 때네니 인지 민지 가서거래 최주바다 띵엔진 곰나레 게림 곰림 게림레 조그림레 되니 나 냠바 더 다나레 양나니 류기 차체나레 차차와이나레 초바부와이나레 양네 짐바땅바이나레 간데 지 제나야 되니 디 인지 민지 징문에 데 라글린 치당데 되니 녜마 장주 셈바레 되니 년대비 다좀바레 디 줄라야 게진 담바된 쪽에 간데 지도 라글린 다 단다 자세 라글린 값도 되니 자세 라글린 데 장주 셈바 당고주 통매세 거 콘남바기 간데 남바나시 데 자세 자비세스나 다 조데 상제 장주 셈바로 고게라 콘남에 제 라글린 간데 지도 지신 제반하시 띵아라야치 나랑조 남바에 다 냠린 지기 강사 줘야 되니 코나바 간데 이제 라글레 지도 수신도 지도 대 나신지 제디 니 개정버려도 스테인도 가세 남지 라글레 셰버자스 타마 색디데레 된 가세스나 다 장주선만 남지 되니 라글레 코나메 라글레 가르치도 디 나신 나랑조야 되니 하고바지 아니 그냥 라글레 냠레 치에스 그러다 디 코나바 나신 지나 되는 알아서 람 노르게 말했다니 나선 드래게 디 람 노르시게 말해 다양 코나바게 라레 시샤지 만도바시 디 알아서 라레 지당 나신 등산의 모던 세고르다 21st century 기념의 지당도 지샤나 또스테니 코나바게 람라 코나바 나신 차토 말해 전주선바 남지기 세저 차토고 말해 친구들 세 내가보다 다르기다 팬받은 대위 중에 다 톱도 연나 되니 콘남바게 라랭 카레 치도 딘 하신 치고레스.
So this is extremely important, and this is why Gyaltse Tokmedan says, I shall now describe the practices of all the Buddha's heirs, because it's extremely important that whatever Dharma practice we engage in, whether we are practicing samadhi, meditation, the generation stage, completion stage, mantra recitation, or physical practices such as prostration, making offerings, practicing generosity, whatever it is in terms of Dharma practice that we are doing, it's indispensable to know the correct method. And that correct method is the one that was used, the one that was followed by all of the Bodhisattvas, the Arhats, the great beings of the past. This correct method, this correct practice, which is the practice of all the Buddha's heirs, this is what Gyaltse Nyosho Tokme is pledging to explain to us here. Gyaltse, actually, which is the title of this author, means Buddha's heir, which means Bodhisattva. So just like the author of this text, Gyaltse Tokme, just like all the Buddha's heirs, who are the Bodhisattvas of the past, and all Bodhisattvas, just like them, if we then practice in the same way, we are certain to attain the same results. We are certain to take the correct path. If we do not practice in the same manner as all the Bodhisattvas, then we might not take the correct path. We might go onto a wrong path. For example, if we want to kind of adapt the Dharma, modernize it in some way, not practice it exactly as it has been practiced by all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, then we might not attain the results. So if we actually do wish for temporary benefit and ultimate happiness, we should practice the Dharma exactly as it has been taught, exactly as the Bodhisattvas have always practiced it. And so this is why here Gyaltse Tokme says, I shall now describe the practices of all the Buddha's heirs exactly as they practiced.
That Lale Yabuji Shena Dini Chenamda Jutu Gres Lale Yabuji Mashena Dini Khan or Chenamda Jutu Mares the Indo Maranzo Dambi Mi Manje with Church Mashi Sedela Kazagore Shira Gachumbo Yomari. Nga Churchigi, Nga Keba Yin, Nga Gigi Pemesegi, Samgi Yu Sedila, Shira Gachumbo Mari. The Zawa said the Lagle, she Mashi. Tilateni Lagle Yabushi, Shigi Yuna, then it did Chuya Bushigi Watare, Chudugu Watare.
And so if one knows the right methods, then our Dharma practice will be pure. If one doesn't know the correct methods, the correct way to apply the Dharma, then it will not be pure. So when we talk about knowing the Dharma or not knowing the Dharma, some people may say, oh, I know the Dharma very well. I'm a scholar, I'm very learned and so on. That's actually not what's so important here. What's important is to know how to apply it. What's important is to know the methods for practicing. And that is what will bring the results.
Tomar Gewalegi doing in Tanda Charbare, Legi doing Sedu, Chobarjavada Tsambarjava Nidi, Tenitsini di Deran Tagi Ures.
And so then this concludes the virtue in the beginning. This concludes the virtue in the beginning, which consisted in the homage and the pledge to commit.
Tatomar Nibadi Bardu Geva Shungi Dens, Tenju Geranshin, Senata, Tenju Geranshin said the Tanda, Tenjingazo, Tambo Shunkoran, Chebe Capsula, Tomar Geva Lake, Bardu Geva Shungi Dens, Bardu Geva Shungi Dens Capsula Leveres.
And so next comes the virtue in the middle, the main text itself. And so after the virtue in the beginning, we arrive at the main part of the text, which is the virtue in the middle.
Dila Mondo Chola Juksoda, Teni Moshi Kebusum Jilamte Baset, those Shunkoral.
On that the Yapakumasan.
Oh, the Shunkoran la de Ni Dusra, Tenju Korange, Subu Dawatilla, Tenju Korange, Rashi Tembatilla, Ni Dus. Mondo Gichola Juksuldan, Ani Moshi Kebusum Jilam Tembas Kebusum.
And so here in the main part of the text has two main sections. First, how to engage in the preliminary practices, and then the main practice for each of the three types of beings, the three capacities.
Mondo Gichola Jukse de la Tini Dundus de la number Ewan number Sevore, number Dundus, Mondo Gichodala.
And so as for the way of the method for engaging in the preliminary activities, there are 7 parts to this.
Ila that Ambodi Tini Dajur Daniel Bas, Dajunia Gava, Tambo, doing Ginani, Tambo de Dajunia Gava Redus, Dajunia Gavasana, Dajur Daniel Java.
And the first among these 7 is to how to make how to make our achievement of the freedoms and advantages meaningful.
Nibadi Payupon was that Duksumgi Juni de Payulindo Payupon was.
The second is leaving one's homeland, which is the source of the 3 poisons.
Sumba de Empatembas. Empatembadi Kansan, Yundengi Juni de Empatengore, Yundengi Chung, Yundengi top go Samna, Teni Empatengores.
The third is to remain in solitude, because remaining in solitude is the source of all qualities, good qualities. The fourth is to mentally let go of this life, of all hopes for this life.
So the fifth
is to give up, forsake all bad friends who are obstacles, who are obstructing conditions to our practice.
튠진 던지데 갈진 종에 바지 튠진 디드니 신인 야고 신이 깽게위 신인데
The sixth is to rely on a spiritual friend, just like the bad friends were obstructive circumstances. So the spiritual friend is a conducive condition, a conducive circumstance for practice.
니 둠바데드니 타마데 둠바데 잡도
The seventh is refuge, the seventh and last is refuge.
이 가르선에 단다 산지 템발라 템비기 주고디 잡도랄 데 타마데 딘 잡도디
Because the entryway into the Buddha's teachings, into the Dharma, is actually a refuge. So this is the seventh preliminary practice.
어디더니 다데라 다주니가 바딜라 다주 루지니가 톱디들 다신 코르베솔레 달지 칠 닌다튼도 여와메바네 년셈 곰바 자슬라리 이세 때당보 디 몬도기 추에 둥기 나니 다 당보디레스 다주 되어 잡았어.
And so here among the seven preliminary steps, the first is this first verse. The practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to study, reflect, and meditate tirelessly both day and night, without ever straying into idleness, in order to free oneself and others from this ocean of samsara, having gained the supreme vessel, a free, well-favored human life, difficult to find. So this is the first preliminary step, which is to make this precious human life with its freedoms and advantages meaningful.
다주 루지니가 톱디들 다신 코르베솔레 다지 다주 루지니가 톱디들에서 다주 대기기 다주 밀르 다주 되어 버자와서 다주 밀르는 뭐지 디 삼라야 보지 다나 가랑주 최지게 당원에 최 양보지 진행지나 당보디 가랑주 밀르는 뭐지 지 양보지 톱 위에메 딱지 당에도 계신 분이 주래 팅도 다주 밀르는 뭐지 디 양보지 톱 위에나 아니 미디 다 나랑조 랑라 가수 지에지다 되는 가수 주인인데 밀르름버체디 미디 가두에나 토라당 말했어 가세 밀르름버체 톱도 민도 딱지 야보지 마당 보이나 디 미제 직 삼로당나 링고다워지레 직 삼로당나니 미다보이가 랑신도 체 가제 대게 유에 메세데 나랑조 가르스나 균이 라마투바지레 데인도 밀르름버체 세디 나라조 딱지당보다 밀르름버체 수레 민도 술라 톱도 민도 세디 가자 지기지라 라나타 하고 말디 도 라나소솔라 민지 딱지당보다 밀르른진 세디 나 톱도 다 밀르른진 톱도 민도 딱지당에디 렌하우르 삼로지다나 달조르 세지도 달와게 파달네 주로주 참고고래 다 달와 게디 정보시는 지게 나랑조다 냐왈라 두고 민두 테니 이달라 두 민두 테니 칸서거래 두돌라 두 민두 테니 나랑조 라당 화민 라마인다 테니 미 나네야 테니 미다 칸서거래 지게 미 참마다 다 되니 인조 말에 되니 랑종아 창도 창민도 빼내 국바 이미 미카시 국바 미카시 따와록바 되니 따와록바에 최지도고 말에 미카시 국바 가제 시민이 암주미 공에 되니 왕부 냠되죠 된데 강사지이나 최고의 그 갈바요 말에 된도 된데 나라 나도 민도 세 딱지 하고 싶단 거 당보 디 달와 달와 게게 낭라다 나랑 도 민도 세 딱지 땅고 딱지 마당 배나 지기 나중에 상도 세 지구 하고 말했을 때도 당고 된저 달저 세디 달와 게단 저와 주 디랑라고 지 딱지 땅고 딱지 땅 사베 jel라더니 신이 드니 디 졸라 땅고도 민도 가르치고도 민도 최치 지나 지고서래 말에 세 디진 신이 삼바 땅고레스
So having gained the supreme vessel of free, well-favored human life, difficult to find. I think regarding these freedoms and advantages of the precious human body, if we are good Dharma practitioners, then we really need to check whether or not we really have this precious human body with all of the freedom and advantages. I think it's really important for us all to actually examine this, check for oneself, whether or not we have all of the freedoms and advantages of the precious human body. And if we find that we do, then we should rejoice in that, be happy for ourselves, and also not let it go to waste. Decide that we won't let these freedoms and advantages go to waste. If we don't check, if we don't examine whether or not we actually have these freedoms and advantages, then really, on the one hand, sure, this life may appear to be long, but on the other hand, we really don't know for how long we will be here. So it's best to check now from the beginning what type of life we have and what we want to do with this life, starting with, do I actually have a precious human body with the freedoms and advantages? We can't really check this for other people. Only we can really know. No one else can tell us. Only we can really know whether or not we have all the freedoms and advantages. And I think it's quite easy, really, to check this for ourselves, whether we have the 8 freedoms, so we are free from the 8 unfree states, and whether we have the 10 advantages, 5 personal advantages and 5 circumstantial advantages. The 8 freedoms, mostly, for us all, we can see we are not in the hell realm. It's also not being a hungry ghost, not being an animal, not being a god or a demigod. But then also within the human realm, not all humans have all freedoms, because one also needs to have all of one's faculties complete. For example, one's 5 sense faculties and mental faculties, so that some people may have mental difficulties and not be able to understand things correctly, or also have impaired faculties so that they are not able to hear the Dharma correctly. So while others may have wrong view, so these are all unfree states as well. So one needs to check, am I free from all the unfree states? Do I actually have all the freedoms and advantages? If one doesn't check, one won't be able to know. If you don't actually examine yourself carefully to see if you have all of the 8 freedoms and the 10 advantages, then you won't be able to know. So once you check this for yourself and determine whether or not you have the freedoms and advantages, then you can also decide what you are going to do with this precious human life. If you find that you have a precious human life with all the freedoms and advantages, then from the beginning you can decide how to make use of this life, how to make it meaningful, how not to let it go to waste. So I think it's quite important to have this foundation of checking and reflecting like this for oneself.
Da dajo milu rinpoche di takje abo ji tang na takje ji tang ba ina kangsa rang su su me ni tene di da dajo milu rinpoche the Peja Nang Sung Shava Nashing, Talwa Gedan, Jurwa Judan Dembegi, Mirror Bidia Pe, the name Tang, Ju Pe, Tang Sum Gi Gonit, and Miller Bushi, Yahoji, Rang Susola, Mala, Top Dua, Sambaji Chungna. The name they Kandasana Tanda Cups, they Peja Ganala, Daju Duchen says the Tuchimbo to sing. Daju Duchen said that around the Nanshin, Janala Tajitan Baina, Talwaji Joroju, and then begin Milurumbuchi de to sing the Pesha. That is to sing the Pesha, Daju Duchen, Tuchimbuchi. Then I Jamzu the parola Drogo Yona, that Jamzu thing around the Korva Dunganashin. The true chamber de Dalwaja and Joroju then be Milurumbuchi Pesha. That true the Meba in a Pemisicale Jagoraya. The two men at the Yana Jabshe or Yanani, Kanga Mamboji Jamni, Jamsu Parol de Pa, Jotuba Chigura. That the Jeva Jevala and that Jamsu Parol said it that Kora Dumagi Yapsulipa, Jolagi. That the Jolagi Yuna, Mena Yakshuji, and around Milurumbuchi. Milurumbuchi Yuna, the to sing Davu the Milurumbuchi Yobaina, the Parol de Majo Jotu Gris. That you to change two chambut. The Duchen said the Duchen said the Milurumbuchi Dara la Pesha. That then I should Duchen the Niega top the dear city that Tobe Capsu, Duchen Bonashi Tobe Capsu, that Parola Drogon Mado, James Parola Teongor Mado, Parol Mando Baina, that the Milurumbuchi di Kajutam the big Sechima around the Togi you may say the Kalik Harbor. You pay Tangsum Jikone Kalik Harbor. Tandagi Nashi Milurumbuchi Nebarkawati, Duchen, Tobarkawam, Nebarkawati, Tobiudu, that the Tola Madam was a Machi Baina. That Maumbala around the Dinashingi Togi, you may say the Kalakova Kazi, Tomato Baina, the Kamso Parola, Drotubeg, Reva Yomares, the Endur, Daju Duchin, Yaga Top the Dir Sedi, Tanda Truding around the Milurumbuchi. Tajuk Milurumbuchi de la Pesha Gires.
And so we can check this for ourselves, whether we have the precious human body with all of the freedoms and advantages as they are described in the texts, the 8 freedoms and 10 advantages, which in the texts are explained by way of reason, by way of their cause, by way of examples, and by way of numbers, of numerical comparisons, that the precious human body is actually very difficult to obtain. So if we find through our reflection that we have obtained this precious human body, then we can think of it as described here in the text as a supreme vessel, or really a big ship. The precious human body with all of the freedoms and advantages is compared here to a big ship that we can use in order to cross over the ocean of suffering of samsara. So if one is faced with a great ocean that one needs to cross over, the ocean here being samsara suffering, then one will cross with much less difficulty if one has a ship to cross in. And this ship here is the precious human body with all of the freedoms and advantages. That is the very best vessel for crossing over the ocean of samsara. So this is the analogy that is given here. We can think of our precious human body as the ship that will bring us across the ocean, that will bring us to the other shore, beyond suffering. However, one needs to actually take that ship in order to cross the ocean. If having this supreme vessel, one chooses not to actually cross the ocean, not to actually use it, then it is taught in the sutras that the precious human body is so difficult to obtain, both in terms of its causes, in terms of it's explained how difficult it is to obtain, also by way of example, and also by way of numerical comparisons in the text. And because it is so difficult to obtain, if we don't make good use of it now, if we let it go to waste, then there's really no telling whether or not we'll be able to once again obtain a precious human body in a future life. This precious human body that is so difficult to obtain, we must make use of now and not let it go to waste.
Tini da rang milirumbuji topni tarba dan tamji jimbi gobang la pa doyegi da kanso gor gyuse gor chodi da ngarangzol goyedi milirumbujir kaze milirumbuji yakbuji mato bayna tini di chö drup tubuge mare da chö yagang dakbaji drubar jebala da dawa jedam jirwaji milirumbuji yakbuji topde trusing dabaji da dile ciknibala dakshin kurvisole daji chesen da rang chikbuya mayimba tini rang daju milirumbuji topji yang chama yukshani drowa chikbu mayimba trusing dikini parodo drowa chikbu mayimba tini shen yang tini da shen chama yang peze da chik korwegi chodile pa tini thare yam yana kyobe yam digi chedu tini chetubayina ani yabo yungres ani da je dakshin korwe cholida dakshin sedi maranzo endere kebu chung kebu ding kebu chembo gi nane dakshin sedi niga nyambo shagdo peze kebu dingi lami sari kansan da shen niga nyambo tendo ngarang simje thamje sedi simje thamje jibu mayimba ngaraya nangla mingchu shagdo peze kebu dingi lami sari kebu chungegi na da rangchikbu jik samlo tangajirwa da dandakabso babu simje thamji jibu mayimba jik ngaraya tsuididu da shen sidu kebu dingi lamridu dele tengidu teni trusing nangla da peze nyambo la ba teni korwe cholida dashin korwe cholida teni dunga korwe chosida da korwagi dunga teni simje rang suzu ge dunga ere nyawale nyawe dunga ani idala ge dunga tundula dunga milay mi ge rangjing ta kega nachi ge dunga la dunga ge dunga da teni de gangla teni chapa duji dunga da teni la da lama yin jula dunga de dunga thamji de chodawoji sha ta ngarang zo de ni darju milerum je thobje de drusing dawo sha de ge chole pa dale am pa ta chi phale droe de ge chirdu de ni nyin da chendo yewa me ba se de ta de le chi chamsam nimu ningo nga zo chue che dawo da chamsam nga zo ji chemo chue che dawo da de mayimba koran ninda chemeba yewa meba ningoan chöchi chemoyan chöchi da shen korwe gi chole pa dai chi ni ninzen ninda chendo yewa meba se di chigdiredu.
And so, having gained then the supreme vessel, this great ship, which is the precious human body, that can bring us to the level of liberation and omniscience, without which it is very difficult to practice the Dharma. The precious human body is the vessel that permits us to practice the Dharma. So having gained this supreme vessel, this great ship, then I will not only practice for myself alone, forgetting about all others and just wanting to liberate myself from suffering, but actually, as the text says, in order to free oneself and others from this ocean of samsara, so both for the sake of myself and for the sake of others, in order to liberate all others as well from this ocean of suffering, which is samsara, or protect them, if you will, from this ocean of suffering, then for that reason, I will practice the Dharma for both myself and others, which among the three types of beings, the three capacities of individuals, the individual of lowest capacity, the individual of middling capacity, the individual of highest capacity. This type of motivation, I think, is the motivation of an individual of middling capacity, who thinks both of oneself and of others, so that together we may be liberated from the ocean of suffering. Of course, an individual of lowest capacity would only think of themselves, but the individual of middling capacity thinks both of themselves and of all others, so that all together we may take this great ship, which is the precious human body, and cross the ocean, which is the suffering of samsara, in which each type of sentient being has a particular type of suffering, so that hell beings have a specific type of hell suffering, hungry ghosts have hungry ghost suffering, animals have their own types of suffering, humans suffer the suffering, the suffering of change, all pervasive suffering. There's the sufferings of the demigods, and so on and so forth. So all beings with all their respective types of suffering, which is like a vast ocean, with this precious human body, which is like a ship, I wish to work for their freedom tirelessly, the text says, both day and night, without ever straying into idleness. So not sometimes practicing, maybe you practice during the day, you don't practice in the evening, you practice in the morning, you don't practice at night, you practice at night, you don't practice during the day, not like that, but day and night, without ever being distracted, without ever being idle, tirelessly practicing in order to liberate all beings with this, thanks to this vessel of our precious human body.
Tadi yin da chen do yelwa me ba se ji do la. Didi kan se ge se na zun ju se ge da. Yin da chen ge yelwa me ba ga ne zun ju chi se ge da. Da zun ju chi de kan la zun ju chi go se ge na. Da da kap su ba de la. Yin da zun do yelwa me ba se di da chi che go ra yin da zun do yelwa me se de yang da chi chi bu len de ge yin da zun do yelwa me ba se di zun ju le ko go ge res. 다 심지게 다단 시행 단지 강가에도 밀을 뭐지 토용도 이 밀을들 배제 약보지 다때 랑지고 많이 심지 탐지야 때 그러와 동아 자절에 봐 타래기 되니 준주치고 그래서 강라 준주치고 그래서 나스나 다디 가당 땡주 강라 준주치고 그래서나 되니디 가당 땡주 나로라 송샤비기 다가단 된제 나를 송샤부터 넘버도 순도 지서레스 준주치 고에 된가랑죠.
And so here, these words, tirelessly, both day and night, that is actually referring to diligence. So it's not just anything that we're doing day and night, but we're practicing diligence. Now that we have this precious human body, in order to liberate ourselves and all others from the ocean of suffering, which is samsara, one needs to apply diligence. But to what do we apply our diligence? In the sutras and the shastras, three types of diligence are described.
예, diligent 이 준주송라라.
Era.
준주송이나
Diligence.
말에 이 엔데레 산지 가다 된주 나랑라더니 준주 제세도 준주 제사기 다 제기 냠네 제당 냠네 락렌 제지 고라라. 준비 되니 가서 준비 지세 줘라라 준비 지역이 다지 준비 지역 거기에다 준비 지역이 가서 빼지 고랄 네 지역이 까단데 주 나로라 나버 숨다우지 숨도
Eso. Di aquí.
las da 가르잖아 나랑도 냠래 간디지 치고레스네 지당데 나랑도 하고고요 말아서 나랑도 하고고요 말아라 데인도즈니 당보 하고 다 하마고도 당보디 단지 된주 나로 까다 된주 나로 넘버 숨기 나니 나랑도 하마고도 다 하고겐게 상기 이숨라 땡고레스 당보디 상기 숨라 준주 치고레스 다 숨베까다지 니바데 케바다 두토 콘조게 짬비기 땡주 딜라 준주 치고라 냠렌치 남렌치 보레스 숨바데 라마 다지 냠레 게 야보 요긴기 데 담갈 데조레스 나도 준주 치고에 데조 숨레 준주 치고레스.
And so the three objects of diligence that are described in the sutras and the shastras, the treatises, are the following. First, when we don't know how to practice, when we don't know what to practice, in order to learn, to understand, one needs to rely on the words of the Buddha, so the sutras. Second, then one needs to rely on the treatises written by the great scholars of the past that explain the words of the Buddha. And third, after that, one also needs to rely on the pith instructions of the Guru.
Kada tenju le song sha ba sanje ji ka yana keba da dukto de zu cham be tenju yana ni lama nyamle ya bo yugen de zu gi damga la ten se ji do de sum de la de ni nyen sim gomba ni kyasa la len nyen se na tenjo da nyen go nyen tenjo la nyen te se te ba de nyen sim nyen se de nyen go da tenjo nyen de ni ni ba de sam se do tö바시 되니바디 삼바시 델라다 다신진 델라 삼바시 되네디 랑라 삼바야보지 차사나 되네딜로 곰바시 된지 숨지도아 델라드네 저선 곰숨지고네 되네 마도 년생 곰바 자스 라글이 세데 타 식타마 되고레스.
And so in this way then what do we do tirelessly both day and night? What do we apply our diligence to? That is the practice of all the Bodhisattvas, is to study, reflect, and meditate. So as explained before, all of the words of the Buddhas, the sutras, the shastras or treatises that were composed by the great scholars and accomplished masters of the past, as well as the pith or oral instructions of the gurus, all of these, how do we relate to them? By studying or listening, reflecting or contemplating, and meditating. So these are, again, three ways in which we apply our diligence: by studying, reflecting, and meditating.
Di indo de tangi ge song sha ju denzo la de ni tangbo ngarang zo ya bo ji nieni ta ngarang zo tangbo ha go go yo mara ha ma go do denzo la de ni lama ge wi shi ni re denzo ni su nie ni rang ge ha ko wa da de ni chik ne ma ko ma nyung wa denzo la chi su ko nyung wa cha de ni de nge ma gyumzen de 간데 이 메는서 한 먹어야 저 하고 차. 그디 암지 냠발레 때문에 터발레 때문에 차요 그래서 냠발레 때문에 차요 그래서 당보디 터바된 게 그래서 최비시라.
And so the first among these, to study or listen, this is the first that we need to engage in. When we don't know at first, we don't understand, we first need to listen to the guru or listen to the spiritual friend in order to hear what one has not yet heard before, to understand what one did not previously understand. And this all comes from first relying on listening or studying. From this comes the knowledge of or the wisdom of studying.
I think around the Nyemba Zamjigi Digirevasena, Nyemba Zamjigi, Nazo Korwa Letargu Mare, Sanji Gobantu Mares, Nyemba Zamji.
But then is listening in this way enough? Just by listening, one won't be liberated from samsara, one will not reach liberation or omniscience.
Kari Goresena, Tadi, Tunda de la Tashi Yabuchi. Sanji Gisung de Kandeji Redu, and Sanji Yisung shall be Mangoji Sung do Chig Lamga Sachu, Lamga said, and the Mangoji Sung shadow, Penny Comjare, and Narando getting Gomrimre, and so Mangoji Sung shadow, that the somewhat Jumzin de la Taji Yabujinan. Taji Yabuji Madana, the Daziki Yang Chigis Tebacheva Zamji, and then you shoot back. Tarbatamji Mugova to Mare, Dunga, Tago Mares, the Indo, the Sung Sharjo de la Tuni, Aranzo, Samba Yapujicin. The Tachi Yapujicin, Sanjil Deba, Debareana, Jamning Jeret, Hangala, Tachi Yapujice Gores, Carson and Azola, Tachi Yapuji Magina, Azola Tesum Yungure. Tesum de Yapuji say Matuna, Tini, Aranzo, Tesum, they want to draw. Teni chwe lamya boji dugu mares tiendo tezum de sele gichido teni somebody yani yangdo chegores tepa chebatela.
So then what else do we need? Well, we need to really examine the meaning of that which we are being taught. So truly examine what the Buddha taught, examine what is being said in the words of the Buddhas about the 5 paths, the 10 grounds of realization, meditation, the generation stage, the completion stage. All of these, we need to really examine the reasons for which all of these were taught. Because just by relying on listening alone, as I said before, one will not reach liberation and omniscience or liberation from suffering. So having listened to the Dharma, one then needs to reflect on it or to truly examine or analyze it. This is extremely important because if one doesn't examine the Dharma, then one will have doubt. And if one is not able to clear one's doubt, then one will not be able to follow the correct path. So it's extremely important after listening to also contemplate the Dharma.
Adi Samba Cheang, Niba Samba Chene, Tarba Topge Revesene, Samba Kamba Chewe Yang, Tarba Top to go to Wio Mares. The Samba Dodo Chess, around the Tesum departure to wear, Tesum Chess Savagella, Tini Doba Yomare, Doba Mena, Tini Tadi Gongur, Tanji Tobachi Jodi. Tene niba sambachi ne te nyamne chigore ya nyamne machi vishashana te sambachi bu ngajo tarba top tu gores tarba top tu mare te indo ta gom gores nyamne chigores nyamne lagle ya bo chigor teni gong de sheba machi teni lagle chidan de teni ta anda kaps baba diwala nyensin gomba se di kyase lagle is ta kyase chanji semba nam je lagle khare chidu de nashi Ingaraya Toba, Samba, Honamba, Toba, Samba, Gomba, Kande, Chidu, Din Nangshin, Ingaranda, Laglen, Shisha chini china tini ngarazo ya janju semba chato gures maomba gyase chato gures.
But based upon reflection alone, will one be able to reach liberation? No, actually, reflection alone is not sufficient. Reflection serves to dispel doubt, but once one has dispelled this doubt, then one needs to meditate. One needs to put what one has listened to and reflected upon into practice. Just by listening or just by reflecting, like I said, one cannot reach liberation. One needs to actually put all of this into practice. So like I explained previously, what is being described here in the text is the practices of all the Buddha's heirs, the practices of the Bodhisattvas. And just like the Bodhisattvas applied these practices, so we as well need to listen, reflect, and meditate in the same way as the Bodhisattvas of the past. And if we do so, if we follow these same Bodhisattva practices, then we ourselves can also become Bodhisattvas.
다 tö바 약보지 삼바 약보지 곰바 약보지 제바 있나 디 담비추기 네 만으로 와 인스 담비추 거란데 내가 되네 만으로 와지니 지도 그래서래.
And so as it is said, to engage in listening, contemplation, and meditation is the unmistaken key point of the sublime Dharma.
네 인도 다 조선 공숨 단지 이 배자 거라나라 중샤바나신 년생 공부자세 라린 세데디 페지 문족의 추억이 나네 당보데 다주니에 가바 다주 되어바데레도 근데 드링데 삼샤나.
And so as it is said, the practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to study, reflect, and meditate tirelessly both day and night without ever straying into idleness in order to free oneself and others from this ocean of samsara, having gained the supreme vessel of free, well-favored human life difficult to find. This then was the first step in the preliminary activities in this text, which was making this precious human body with its freedoms and advantages meaningful. And so we can stop here for today. And so I think there's questions and answers. Q&A now. Okay, so you can write any questions you have in the chat if there are any questions. Comment se dit la tikire?
야수.
Tu vois, il y en a chat dans la. Tanda yomare. Maybe there, I don't know if anyone has a question. Tanda yosamarela.
Hola. Tene mena da ngowaji tangi keranzo chamagi nyembi gewache tene ngege tene sheshabe gewache tene zu domde tene simje tamji gutundu ngogi is.
So if there aren't any questions, then we can now dedicate all of the merit that was accumulated through listening to this talk and myself explaining this text. we combine all of these merits together to dedicate them to all sentient beings.
Sunamde Tamjibani Tamni Betana Bamjani Yakana Chekala Tupa Sibizole Ndrowando Varasho Chanchu Senjurimbo Jemaji Banam Jejuji Keba Nyamba Meba Gone Gondo Varasho Tambaji Kamsu Jimba Temba Nivation Tenze Benlov Darshin Jeba Ye Temba Yurin Nebe Tashi Sho. Number Samal.
Thank you, everyone.